In the new Ode to Greece update, a bunch of new things were added, and one of the things that I'm the most excited for is the new legendary infantry commander Pyrrhus, because I believe he has some amazing potential as a free-to-play low-spender KvK1 infantry commander, which players can carry through to Season of Conquest. So today I'll talk all about Pyrrhus. I will discuss results that we've seen in other channels, such as Omniarch's channel. I will discuss his skills, his pairings, his talents, what I think he's going to do on the open field, prediction for his Relic that I hope will happen, and who this commander will actually benefit. So if you are interested in Pyrrhus or you're in the early game and you just need a very good infantry commander, you definitely need to check out today's video. Let's begin with Pyrrhus' skills like I do with almost every commander video, because I think skills are probably what make a commander the commander. So his active skill, he deals 1400 direct damage factor to one target and increases his normal attack damage dealt by 20% for 3 seconds. This is actually a really nice normal attack damage increase. Yeah, it's an increase. It's not a debuff like Pericles, who we discussed yesterday. However, it is still a nice increase. I'm happy that he's getting some sort of a buff to himself on his active skill. He is actually much better than Thutmose, for example. And I think that Thutmose and Pyrrhus are very similar in the way that their skills are structured, and I will talk about that a little bit going on. But you can see that already Pyrrhus has way better damage factor than Thutmose on his active skill. Then the next skill on Pyrrhus, his second skill, he gains an increase of infantry health by 10%, which is really nice, and also a 15% march speed increase, which is all the time. So that is a really good march speed increase. Not many infantry commanders have march speed at this early stage of the game. Charles Martel doesn't get it till you expertise him. I think Richard also does not have much march speed, if any. So Richard is another commander who doesn't have march speed, so I think it's definitely very good to give Pyrrhus some form of march speed, and it does make him a lot more viable, especially early game, where if you look at all the infantry commanders, besides Pericles, who just released, none of them have march speed till you get to Alexander the Great. So I am really happy that Pyrrhus has some amount of march speed in his kit. Then also, while outside of Alliance territory, he's dealing another 15%, 20% normal attack. So you can get a total of a 40% normal attack bonus here, which is extremely good. You're dealing very high skill damage for a KvK1 commander, plus a lot of white damage because he's got extremely high normal attack. 40% of a boost is crazy, and since it's in a passive skill slot, it will stack with his active skill buff and any other normal attack buffs you have on your march. So I think that's a really, really good thing, giving Pyrrhus a lot of normal attack. It seems that Lilith did go pretty hard in on normal attack for Pyrrhus and on Pericles, and I think that's the vibe they're going for with the early game infantry. Decent damage factor on Pyrrhus with a lot of normal attack, which is what I'm picking up so far. Then on his third skill, you get an infantry attack bonus of just 20% while on the map. So whenever you're on the map, that does not include resource nodes, city garrisons, and flags/forts/passes, you will get yourself a nice 20% attack bonus, which is good early game. You don't have much attack early game. Late game, which is still viable in late game by what I've seen, not as good, but still a nice little buff to have as just an extra thing. And then whenever he's attacking anything, he has a 10% chance to gain a shield. Shield factor 500 for 3 seconds. Nice little instant shield there, very similar to CPO's instant shield. I think almost the same, actually the same amount of shield. So very, very nice shield to have on a Pyrrhus, just a gold key commander. He's also he's really, really easy to get this commander. So his shield is a nice thing to have access to, and it's in a passive skill slot, which is also great. Then the fourth skill, he takes 20% less skill damage. Right off the bat, you're hitting real hard with that skill because skill damage from commanders like YSG, skill damage from commanders like Nevsky, Joan, Minamoto, that is their main source of damage, and Pyrrhus is some ways mitigating that ever slightly. So it is going to make you a lot more effective against commanders like Nevsky and Joan and Minamoto and XY, which is what he's pretty much supposed to counter because he is an infantry commander. So I am happy with that skill damage reduction, plus you'll be taking a lot less AoE, especially in the early game where people are running Sun Tzus and YSGs a lot. You'll be noticing that your AoE damage taken will be a lot lower since there's going to be less skill damage taken. Also, whenever he has an active shield, he gains 10% more all damage, which is a nice boost to himself whenever he has that instant shield. Very similar to Charles Martel's active skill, but Charles Martel does not need the shield to have his damage bonus, though it is nice to have Charles Martel's damage bonus on his shield as well. Pyrrhus is kind of like a mini Martel in that regard, where he gets a shield, and when he has the shield, he gets a nice all damage boost. Then the final skill on Pyrrhus, whenever he's hit with a normal attack, he has a 10% chance to reduce the attacking troops' attack by 30% for 3 seconds. This is pretty much the same as Pericles' debuff, except it's attack and not normal attack. Yes, it's a lot less valuable than normal attack, and I would rather have the normal attack here, though still giving an attack reduction and a passive skill slot, I wouldn't complain. I think it's a nice little addition to his kit. it definitely beats out commanders like, for example, Thutmose, who get a really minor buff. Like his expertise, 5% less damage, and whenever he uses an active skill, gain a little bit of a boost to normal attack. I prefer giving the debuff to the opponent, so I am quite happy with the Pyrrhus expertise there. I wish it had a little bit more. Maybe it had a bit of an improvement on his skill damage, but then maybe that would take him a bit too powerful. So overall, I think this is a pretty good expertise. You're giving a nice debuff, and whenever you get hit, you're going to deal the debuff. So it does make him a little bit anti-swarm, plus the shield, and whenever he gets a shield, he's gaining a bunch of all damage. It is another form of anti-swarm that he does have. And then also he's got a bunch of health, and the march speed's going to allow him to get away. So you can see here that Pyrrhus is like an all-round commander, very similar to Thutmose. When Thutmose released, he just does everything. Thutmose does everything that you could think of in an open field commander, and it's just kind of like all average what he does. Pyrrhus does everything a little bit above average in my opinion. He's got a nice amount of stats. That's the main thing he's actually missing though, is normal stats like health and defense. He's only got like 10% health and then 20% attack on like his whole kit. So it obviously would be a little bit better if he had a little bit more of the more premium stats, 40% attack, in his whole kit. So he is missing out a little bit on the defense, a lot actually on the defense, which is usually what infantry are made for. That can actually be a good thing because infantry equipment, which has defense, which is the legendary set, is going to be a lot more valuable on him. So I think that maybe the defense lacking isn't too bad since a lot of infantry equipment does require defense. So not the worst thing. You can definitely mitigate it with a lot of the available infantry equipment right now, though I still would have liked to have some defense on him. Also, he is missing an AoE, that is something to note. And also his shield is a little bit low. I mean, it's on par with like Scipio, so I guess you can't complain too much, but it's definitely not on par with Pericles or definitely not on par with Martel. Also, I wish he did have a little bit more damage factor. I mean, it's good for a gold key commander, but I think that if you want him to be game breaking, he needs to have a higher amount of damage factor, which hopefully his Relic does answer that, and we'll talk about his Relic a little bit later. Now let's discuss some very good pairings for Pyrrhus, and I think that he does hold a lot of strong pairs, especially some Season of Conquest pairs, which I'll mention as well. For you early game players, his best pair in the game is definitely going to be Charles Martel. I think unlike Pericles, he doesn't synergize as well with Richard. They will work, they will still trade quite well, but the thing with Pyrrhus is he's not benefiting from Richard's healing as much as Pericles would. Though if you want to run a Richard with a Pyrrhus, that will work. But his best early game pair before Alexander the Great definitely is going to be Charles Martel. Charles Martel has a lot of tanky stats. He's bringing the health and the defense, especially, that our friend Pyrrhus is missing. And then Charles Martel has increased counterattack, and we know that counterattack is also affected by your normal attack, so it is a little bit of a double up there, but most of the early game infantry have some form of counterattack, like Richard also has a nice counterattack damage bonus, so you can't really mitigate that, though it is always nice to have extra counterattack in my opinion. And if you expertise Martel, you're going to get a bunch of extra march speed, but that is definitely a whale thing, and at that point, pick whichever commanders you want. His next best pair would definitely be Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is bringing a shield on his active skills, so it is going to a little bit double up there, and the same thing with Charles Martel actually. They also are bringing shields on their active skills, but still, I think Alexander the Great is the better pairing than Martel, because Alexander the Great has damage factor. Also, Alexander the Great is bringing a lot of march speed, which is nice. You'll be able to move around very quick with that march, just a total of 45% infantry march speed. And then also, Alexander the Great has a massive defense bonus, so I think that's also an amazing thing to have with Pyrrhus, since Pyrrhus is definitely a bit lacking on the defense. And then also, finally, Alexander's expertise is going to allow you to, I think it's debuff your enemies if I'm not mistaken, which is also fairly nice. As for like the earliest game pairs, I think him plus Pericles will oddly synergize quite well. Pericles, when he gets swarmed, is reducing all the normal attack people deal, and then Pyrrhus is taking less normal attack and then also dealing more normal attack out. So very happy with that. I think that the Pericles plus the Pyrrhus pairing is actually going to perform quite well. I don't think it's going to be groundbreaking, but if you have those two commanders, they will synergize pretty well, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they've performed fairly decently on the open field. They're definitely going to do well in Sunset Canyon. I'd recommend Pericles with Pyrrhus if you don't have Charles Martel for Sunset Canyon. Also, obviously, Sun Tzu plus any infantry commander in the early game is going to shred, so he's going to be a really good option, especially KvK 1. Not so much KvK 2, but still usable in KvK 2. Also, after that, you could run a Mehmed with him. I think Mehmed, even in the late game with Pyrrhus, could certainly be fairly powerful, but that is speculation at that point. These other pairings I'm mentioning are definitely going to do well, but Mehmed is a bit of a speculation. Now, what pairs do I reckon will work well in Season of Conquest? Well, definitely Scipio. I think Scipio with Pyrrhus is going to be where I think Pyrrhus shines, because he's going to work well in the early game. You get access to him basically at the start of the game, and then you could run him with Scipio. The only thing that's really dictating whether or not he work well with Scipio is a little bit about his museum relic, which once again I said we'll talk about a little bit later on. Another pairing with him, I think Tarek will work well, and also Sargon. I think Sargon has good potential with him. Sargon brings, I think, infantry march speed here. So that's a nice bonus to Sargon. You're going to have 30% march speed. Plus Sargon is dealing a lot of single target damage. So it is nice to have that single target damage plus making your opponents take more skill damage for the rest of your mutable. And then Pyrrhus can provide a little bit of tankiness and a lot of normal attack to go with the single target damage that Sargon is dealing, which means it's going to be a really good single march killing march, I guess. You are missing the AoE in this march, but I do like having the single march killer in my mutable every now and again, so definitely is going to perform quite well there. Other than that, I don't know if his Season of Conquest pairs would be that crazy. I mean, most players really choose to either go with CPO or with Sargon. Also, I guess Taro could work, but at that point, we're just naming all the top infantry commanders. So in my opinion, best pairs definitely would be CPO would be his best of his best, and then Sargon would be his second best. By the testing I've seen though, Charles Martel with Pyrrhus is definitely going to work extremely well. There was a video Omniarch made where Charles Martel and Pyrrhus were fighting an Expertise, Nevsky, and Joan. Charles Martel having one relic, and then Pyrrhus doesn't have his relic currently, and they were winning by a substantial amount. So I would expect that Charles Martel and Pyrrhus is working as a pretty good Season of Conquest pair as well. And if you have Expertise Martel, you're getting a nice March speed bonus, which helps for the lack of March speed that he would normally have. Now, before we discuss which players Pyrrhus would suit, we'll discuss his relic, because I think that's going to be the final, I guess, nail in the coffin of whether or not he's a good commander or a bad commander, because if he's a bad commander, that nail is going to go right through his head, but if it isn't, it's going to miss him by just a little bit, because if his museum relic is pretty good, we can expect him to be one of, if not the best early game investments. I'm hoping for a relic like Minamoto, where he gets a massive boost to stats. I don't really think he needs the increased skill damage as much as I said before. Overall, I think it's going to be better if he gets a nice boost to his stats, possibly something similar to Thutmose, and also similar to Minamoto, because we don't really have an infantry commander that has that level of stat increase besides Martel, but Martel's still around 10 to 20% stats off of Minamoto and Thutmose's relic. So I would expect Pyrrhus to have a massive stat increase. He could have a relic similar to Caesar, where he's getting some form of all damage plus march speed, or I guess attack, something like that at least would make him way better. I think that giving him a relic which is going to give him a lot of stats overall is definitely going to be really good. Something also similar with the skill damage reduction would be even nicer, because I know he does already have some amount of skill damage reduction, but more is always better, especially with skill damage reduction. I like that stat a lot. If he had some amount of health as well, that would be really good. So I guess at this point we're just naming all the good stats, but if he has a high amount of health or a high amount of all damage, then I think that he's got really good potential of being a very, very powerful infantry commander. Or if he's just got crazy high stats like Minamoto's relic, where he's got like 30% of each stat, he definitely will perform quite well. Also, quickly, I will discuss how you unlock Pyrrhus. Currently, there is no way in the game to unlock him, unless you're in one of the older kingdoms. The Greek events may have come out already, plus the bundles. But once he fully comes out in the game, you should be able to buy him in your daily special offer as one of the commander options here. He should also appear inside of the Expedition shop. Every day there is a chance he will appear as one of the sculptures you can buy here. And then also, he will appear obviously inside of your gold chest. So whenever you see Pyrrhus in your gold chest, you could pick him up in there. There's also a chance he does come out to Wheel of Fortune with all the new commanders that they've been adding to Wheel of Fortune in the early game. That is certainly possible. Or he comes out to Mightiest Governor in the early game. That is also another possibility. We do know he will come to Card King as well, but in the late game kingdoms, Card King doesn't exist anymore. For early game players though, Card King is a thing for you, so you can expect to see Pyrrhus inside of your Card King event. Now let's discuss some Pyrrhus talents, but before we do, Leonidas is only being used as a placeholder commander here. He has the exact same stat trees as Pyrrhus. Now, I just go all in on the infantry tree because I think this is probably the most valuable tree out of the defense or the infantry tree. I think the defense tree has a lot to be desired, but it does bring some okay stats in some skills, so here's what I'd personally run. I'd go all in on infantry, grab every single skill point you possibly can, and then I just go in on the defense tree, and then you got two options. You could go and get pseudo formation, which is okay. It's going to give you a nice all damage taken reduction, actually a fairly good one, but it's going to cost you in total 8 points to unlock, where instead, for 8 points, you could get no weakness plus max loose formation, which is also an option. So they're the two options, really. You go all in and you grab pseudo formation, or instead you go down to the left side and you grab no weakness, and then you go down to the full bottom left and you grab loose formation, making you take a nice 9% reduction in skill damage, and you put the last point into the health right here. That's the real two talent builds you could run. I actually would personally run this second talent build, but if you want to run the pseudo formation, it's certainly an option, though I do prefer having the 4 max skills between Spiked Armor, Master Armor, Burning Blood, and also the no weakness, plus you get loose formation giving you a nice skill damage taken reduction. So there's the personal build I would run if I was using Pyrrhus. So where do I think Pyrrhus is going to perform well? And simply, I think the best place for Pyrrhus to perform is going to be open field and Sunset Canyon. Because he's an infantry commander, he's going to perform really well in game modes that require you to be tanky. Exhibit A is Sunset Canyon. So in the early game, especially with the Canyon tournament, him plus Martel is going to be the meta combo in my opinion. I think it's going to be by far and away the top of its leagues. Also, Pyrrhus with Pericles is going to be really good in Canyon as well. But for the open field, I think Pyrrhus, depending on his relic, could become really good in Season of Conquest. But even if his relic is bad, he's still going to demolish in the early game. He could even serve as a good infantry rally, since to my knowledge, there are no amazing infantry rallies in the early game. I guess there's like Charles Martel with YSG, but that works with everything. So I think Pyrrhus could make a really, really good infantry rally in KvK 1. Not so much KvK 2, though he could still work with Alexander the Great. But I feel like an Alex YSG is just going to be better than a Pyrrhus with an Alex, though we will still see where that goes. There is certainly a possibility that Pyrrhus does become one of the rally meta for KvK 2 and even KvK 1. I don't think he'll become a Garrison meta. He's missing a few of the stats he'd want with a Garrison. Also, he does have the skill that he has to be on the map with, which is his attack increase. And, I mean, it's only attack, but it's not going to be the most amazing Garrison, though it will certainly work in the early stages of the game. So would I recommend Pyrrhus for free-to-play low spenders? Well, if you're watching these videos, the time of his relic has come out, and it's a really, really powerful relic, and you'll probably see a video. I would have made a video on his relic. If it is a really powerful relic, then yeah, I'd say go for him. But right now, unless you're an early game medium spender, he's not worth it. It's basically like investing in Charles Martel early game. Some people will say, yeah, it's a good idea to have a little bit of fun early game, and that's certainly feasible. But for most players who want to get the most value in Season of Conquest, I'd say you're probably going to skip Pyrrhus for the time being. But once his relic comes out, who knows, he may become one of the top infantry commanders since he is already performing really decently. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I have one request. Please join the Archer Syndicate Discord, because there you can chat with me, fellow members of the channel, fellow subscribers. It's a really cool place. You can talk about literally anything in there. I don't care if you discuss any things I can't make videos on, if you know what I mean. So if you want to join that server, feel free. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.